Welcome, everybody, to Sports Innovation Lab Ask Me Anything series. My name is Gina Waldhorn. I'm Chief Operating Officer for the Sports Innovation Lab. And we created this Ask Me Anything series with a focus on facilitating conversations with leaders who are looking at the current health crisis as an opportunity for action and innovation. If you're new to the series, last week we welcomed executives from Cisco and from the Boston Celtics. And past guests have included trailblazers from across the sports world, including folks like Val Ackerman, chairman of the Big East Conference, NBA champion Paul Gasol, the VP of Media for the LA Rams, executive leadership from Clear, from Intel, from Armored Things. And really our goal is to garner perspectives from across and sometimes outside the industry, from operators, players, leagues, teams, and content producers. And that brings us to today's, where we are thrilled to have with us Ishwara Glassman Chrein, the head of sports partnerships and business development at Yahoo Sports, Verizon Media. But before we kick off the conversation with Ishwara, we want to give you a quick update on a few things and let you guys know how you can participate today, as it is an Ask Me Anything. So first off, if you enjoy the conversation today and you have a question that maybe doesn't get answered right away or that you'd like to field to Ishwara or other executives, please join our Sports Innovation Lab Slack community. With over 800 members, we've got teams, leagues, players, technology companies, content producers. Please come join us. It's a wonderful community where you can find lots of resources and start a truly engaging dialogue. It is free to join. Also, tomorrow at 2 p.m., we are cutting off registration for our Hack Sports Back Hackathon. If you've got an idea for how to recreate some of the lost experiences that fans are encountering with ghost games, so maybe it's missing the cheering, maybe it's missing the footlongs, maybe it's missing the kiss cam, whatever it might be, we want to hear how you've got an idea to use technology to recreate those feelings of fan togetherness. Come as an individual, come with a team, come with skills, no skills. We'll put you on a team. Just come if you want to be stimulated and, use those creative juices to help bring sports back. So if you want more information, reach out to anyone at Sports Innovation Lab. You've got until tomorrow to register for that. And then finally, quick update. We won't be having an AMA this Thursday, as we will be having our hackathon and doing some special programming on our Facebook live stream for that. But we're back Tuesday, May 26th with Craig Levine, the Global Strategy Officer for ESL. So we've heard a lot of questions about what esports is up to during the pandemic and how traditional sports leagues can learn from esports and how they're pivoting their business. So we're gonna have a really engaging conversation on Tuesday. So let's get started and let's have you guys ask Ishwara some questions. How it works, you're gonna stay on mute, please, and ask questions by using the chat feature. If you need to duck out or you love what you hear today, don't worry, we're going to be sending you a recording of today's session. If you're not familiar with where that chat is located, look at the bottom or maybe top of your Zoom, find the little chat icon, expand the chat window. You can choose to send the question directly to everybody by posting to everyone, or if you'd like, select send to host, and the question will go privately to myself or Josh, where we'll be curating your questions for Ishwara today. So with that, I'd love to now introduce our guest and today's host, Josh Walker. Josh Walker is co-founder and president of the Sports Innovation Lab. And Josh was formerly VP of Research at Forrester. Josh stewards the lab's progressive research practice and introduced the world to the concept of the fluid fan. Josh leads Sports Innovation Lab's client roster of over 50 blue chip sports brands to understand how to connect to that fluid fan. And as of late, you may have heard, seen, or listened to Josh as he's been featured in a lot of different media outlets, from Sports Illustrated to Synopsis to Future Sport, as he's really become a preeminent voice in what the resurgence of sports is going to look like to help guide organizations on bringing fans back and connecting with them at home when the time is right. So Josh, thanks for hosting our conversation as always. And our guest today is Ishwara Glassman Chrein, the head of sports partnerships and business development at Yahoo Sports, Verizon Media. Ishwara leads the gaming strategy as well as relationships and negotiations with the NFL, and MLB, NBA, and NBC, as well as other sports leagues, broadcasters, statistical companies, and technology companies. Ishwara began her career at McKinsey & Company and Lehman Brothers before spending 9 years at WME Sports, Entertainment, and Media, most recently as SVP and Global Head of Sales Operations and Strategic Planning. Ishwara graduated magna cum laude from Columbia with a degree in economics and political science and received her master's in international affairs from the Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs. Ishwara lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan with her husband, 2 kids, and 1 enormous golden retriever. And Ishwara is also a recipient of the Sports Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award. Ishwara, thank you so much for taking time today to speak with us. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Josh to kick off our conversation. And don't forget to post your questions for Ishwara in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Dina. And thank you, Ishwara, for joining us. I'm starting to measure my time by the number of haircuts I have at home. And Gina always reminds us at the beginning when we started this series, and it was back in March. And what I'm starting to get a sense of is that we're turning a corner. And I have to sort of use that as a setup here because there's some things that are happening now that weren't happening even just a week ago, which is the live sports seems to come back. We're starting to get some early figures on what the Bundesliga was doing and how the ratings were through the roof and everybody was excited about that. And now we're getting that little bit of a hangover period where people are like, yeah, but how long will this last? Because, how long are we going to be excited about, having games that aren't in the same sort of enthusiasm with fans in the venue? Your whole business, your whole job, everything you've negotiated, that whole bio that Gina gave setting us up really depends on the live sports environment being, thriving and being vibrant. How has your day job changed? Like, what are you doing now and how are you shifting your priorities given everything that's going on?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Josh, and thanks for the nice introduction, Gina. Yeah, it's interesting. We have a lot of the same things to do and a bunch of new things as well. We have found things to write about. We got a lot out of writing about Michael Jordan the past few weeks, so we will all be sad that that is over. We were all excited to see Bundesliga and NASCAR and UFC the last weekend, but for sure, our core sports business is about reporting on sports. So while we've certainly found stories to write, there have been a lot of great stories about charity work and about what players are doing in their free time. The heart of our business is reporting on live sports that happened in the past few days. Also, a big part of our business, as you know, is fantasy sports, and it's hard to score fantasy point rosters without live sports. I would be fooling you and everyone else if I knew what the future holds. Nobody knows exactly when live sports are going to resume and how that's going to go. We all hope it's going to be soon. And in the meantime, we're continuing to try to serve our fans and prepare to do even cooler, innovative things when sports really do come back in full.
You work at a big company, and the dig on big companies is it's hard to be agile and move quickly and pivot when you need to. Over the last few weeks, have you seen examples or have you done things with your own team that are just different in the sense of like either aligning people to new coverage areas or covering new sports or working on new activations that you haven't done in the past? Are there any examples of that?
Yeah, we put on something really cool a few weeks ago. We did an event with the Women's Sports Foundation where we got 5 to 10 leading women's athletes. We had, Billie Jean King, Sabrina Ionescu. There were a lot of cool athletes there. And we spoke to everyone, but particularly young women, about what these women are doing today, how they're preparing to go back, how they're keeping themselves positive. And that's something we probably wouldn't have done 6 months ago. I think there's a lot of talk right now about Verizon, about doing more of that. Verizon Corporate has been doing events on Thursday nights called Pay It Forward, which raise money for small businesses, where they have live concerts, entertainers. And I think these are new things we're thinking about doing. From a personal perspective, I was always one of these people that was in the office every day and really loved to take great pride in being in the office every day. And it's been interesting for me to see that we all can work from home remotely. And I think it's actually even given me a chance to get to know people better. When you're on a conference call with someone and their child walks in, or their parent, or their significant other, or their dog, it just leads to sort of a more personal connection. So something good has come out of it.
And what about some of the things that you've seen the industry do, not necessarily Verizon Media or Yahoo in particular, but like what surprised you in terms of what you've seen your colleagues, your peers, or your partners do that you would have said, wow, I didn't think they were capable of that, or that's just something I didn't think would happen. Is there anything that as an industry insider you look out and you go, wow, you know, that was an impressive pivot, or that was an impressive activation, or I didn't know they had those assets?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I don't think any of us had obviously prepared for or expected this. It's been interesting to see some of the simulated sports be really good. I'll be honest to say, I was really impressed by what NASCAR and some of what Formula One did. I thought the quality of the simulcasts were really interesting, and they actually, from what I've read, did really well and sort of got a younger audience for them. So I thought that was really well done and interesting from a league that generally doesn't get as much attention as some of the other leagues. So for sure, kudos to them on doing that well.
And I'm gonna, you know, obviously reinforce the fact that, you know, you are looked at as one of the rare female executives in sports. You did get recognized this year as 40 under 40. We're very proud of you for doing that. Women look up to you as a role model, and there's been some real sort of knee-jerk reaction to saying, hey, look, the old boys club of sports has been operating this business and really doing the backroom deals, you know, relying heavily on media rights, maybe not innovating as quickly as possible. When you look at sort of the next generation of leaders in this industry, is there something that you think you've done particularly well that you could almost use as advice to those young women that are trying to break into an industry that's so male dominated, that's very traditional in the way that it's operated in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is don't be afraid to be who you are. Be the best version of yourself. But I've never been quiet. If I go to a meeting, I'm certainly going to be heard. And lastly, I think more than anything for me is don't wait around for someone to give you something. It's just not going to happen that way. Be it the job that you really want at the company or the promotion or the raise that you really deserve. You're going to have to go fight and ask for what you want. And not everyone's going to like that. And that's okay. It's okay to go fight for what you want.
So while you've got your fighting gloves on, I'm gonna ask you some of the questions that are coming in privately and otherwise, and they're gonna touch on some delicate situations. So I'm going to enjoy watching you dance a little bit here. But you have some great partnerships with the leagues. There's going to be a lot of negotiations on a lot of the contracts that were fulfilled or not fulfilled. Without getting yourself in trouble, can you just talk about the environment in which you navigate partnerships where there's been situations that are out of everybody's control, but you need to make sure that there's either some sort of make good or some sort of future commitment that the leagues and the media partners are doing together?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things that Verizon prides itself very much on is being a good partner and growing through partnerships. We are in this business and have been in this business for a while and plan to be in this business for a long time. And we want to work with our partners, for example, at the leagues and other partners, MGM or the data companies, for a long time. And while we obviously, for example, pay many of the leagues for rights, and you don't get as much from those rights when those live games aren't occurring. You know, for example, we get highlights packages from the NBA and from Major League Baseball, and we stream live games from the NFL, and we pay a substantial amount of money for those. Obviously, most of those sports are not going on right now, and I don't think anyone knows how many games each league will play this season or next season.
Have those partners been able to, in the short term, provide you with other forms of content, whether it's user-generated content from their fans or archival content? Has there been any sort of effort to say, hey, look, we don't have this, but we have this?
For sure. I mean, for example, if you watch Yahoo Sports, we are streaming classic games, NBA games. I think last night we streamed a Michael Jordan game that did very well, probably on the back of The Last Dance. But I mean, I think we all need to be honest with ourselves that streaming a classic game for ESPN or for Fox or for Yahoo Sports is not going to generate the same amount of viewership or revenue that live games do. And it's great to have it. We're very thankful to have the archival footage. But I think what we're trying to figure out is how do these deals with the leagues work in the long run? Is it that time gets added to the league deal? Do we get make goods? I think we're all trying to figure that out. But we want to be in business with them for a long time. We're trying to find a reasonable solution that works for everyone. And it's still early because we don't know what the result is going to be yet.
So I have another question from somebody who's starting to build their career in this industry. And they say, as someone who's new to the industry selling sponsorships for athletes and tennis events, I rely more on cold calls and emails rather than existing relationships. What advice would you give to young professionals that are in my shoes, especially those that are sensitive to the times that we're in and over the next several months? So we've heard this question a bunch of different ways throughout all of our AMAs, honestly, where people are trying to gauge when is it right to sell in the market? When is it right to approach people like you about, hey, is there budget? Is there commercial opportunity? Are we in that phase yet? So market timing wise, what is your advice? And then what would you say to somebody who doesn't have a Rolodex of relationships to draw on?
Right. I mean, I would tell you as Verizon, and I don't run the sponsorship group. Verizon's a very big company. We have a lot of different people, but the Verizon, we think at some level that as a big company that's doing well through this crisis, it's not a bad time to buy, right? I mean, it's a time for a company that's in a good financial position to think about how we can be better positioned for the future. So we definitely are looking at things we can continue to do to grow. I mean, I think pitching to a company that's been hard hit right now may not be received well, but those of us who are doing well are thinking about how we can do that. It is hard. I couldn't tell you that I reply to every LinkedIn request I get selling me something. It's too much, but I'm more likely to reply to you if you find someone I know to introduce you, or particularly focus on selling me something that you think I might want. Why should I be interested in this?
And do you delegate a lot of those cold pitches to your team, or do you tend to like to see what's coming in through the door?
Yeah, I mean, I am most interested in seeing new pitches for new technology. Verizon is, driven on the 5G space. So the ones I respond the most to are the ones that involve new technologies, new companies we could partner with that are doing cool things.
And you and I talked about this a little bit in the prep call for this, and I'm genuinely still very curious how this answer continues to change over the next couple of months. Verizon's been very well known for pushing 5G into NFL stadiums. You have a very strong reputation for allowing NFL fans to have that level of next generation connectivity. Because fans aren't going to be in venues in the next 6 months, by most consensus, that's the feeling. Has that shifted the priorities for Verizon as a whole, right? I mean, there's Verizon Media, there's Verizon that does the cell towers. Like, is there something that says, hey, we should go aggressively now because we can actually do this better because nobody's in the venues, we have more opportunities to put our hardware and stuff into the venue? Or is it more like, hey, let's take a step back and focus over here because this is a better near-term opportunity?
Verizon is very much focused on the long term. We haven't taken our foot off the gas on any of the things that we've done so far. Continuing to wire stadiums and arenas across the NFL and other leagues is continuing very quickly. I think what we are doing is also thinking about, we think about it in two ways. What can we do for fans in the stadium? But we're also giving a lot of thought, maybe more thought now, to how can we make the experience at home even better? And we think there's a big opportunity for us to do that for people during this time when they maybe can't go into the stadium. Can you do cool things with AR or VR overlays while people are at home?
Okay, the questions are coming in pretty fast now, so I'm going to try to read them and make sense of them at the same time, which is always a challenge. Did you see an increased demand with industry female-focused content such as Wnba, women's soccer, or female Olympic athletes? Do you have a lot of that content on Yahoo?
Last year, we streamed the National Women's Soccer League, which did really well for us. And we did this women's event a couple of weeks ago that I mentioned with the Women's Sports Foundation, which was really well received. Verizon and Verizon Media as a whole, I'm proud to say, have a lot of female executives, and we own Huffington Post and Yahoo Finance. We do a lot of content by and design for females. I wish we could do even more sports content about women. It's something we're always thinking about. We talk about it a lot with our partners at the Wnba. We were hoping to do a lot of female Olympic athlete stories this summer. We will hunt and hopefully do them again next summer.
And when you look at your demographics, your user base, is it skewed toward showing an interest in that content, or you feel like it's just Yahoo's responsibility to put that out there? It's not like charitable work. Does it perform as well as the other sports content you have on your platform?
I think, we look at this from two sides. One, there has to be an ROI. We are a business that runs for profit, but also we do want to do the right thing, and we do participate actively in many things that don't necessarily generate ROI, but are the right thing to do. And I think it's all of our duty in the sports media space to do a better job. I think as sports fans and as sport media to promote women's sports. I mean, we all have to do more. We have to go to games when we can. We have to buy tickets. We have to watch.
So I'm going to ask you something that's related to that in terms of like fringe startup leagues.
Yeah.
We work with a number of them. Athletes Unlimited is doing their softball launch, and they've promised to do volleyball to follow up quickly after that. We have the Drone Racing League, which has been around for a number of years now, but could be seen as an emerging upstart league. How interested are you guys in those emerging properties in terms of carving out new niches or owning rights others don't have?
For sure. I will tell you today that our biggest sports are the biggest sports for everyone. We have big deals with the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and we do a lot of college sports content. We currently have not streamed a lot of lesser tier sports today. I think it's something we'll continue to look at, but we haven't done it thus far.
And another question to continue on the 5G growth, and this is how AMAs work, and I know that your brain can handle this, jumping around.
Yep.
But to continue on the 5G thing, Chris asks, outside of the NFL, do you see other leagues moving as quickly or being as aggressive in sort of instrumenting their stadiums with 5G infrastructure?
I do think the other major leagues are doing something very similar. I think you've seen most of the, I know for a fact that all of the major leagues are very heavily invested in trying to figure this out. I mean, one, it's for the fan experience, just to be able to have basic internet access, but there's a lot of things that can be powered by 5G in the future. I mean, some of it now is talking about some of the safety and security measures that will be needed to be powered by 5G, but we see it, for example, for those of you who were at the Super Bowl this year, we partnered with the NFL to have a multicam experience. So if we installed 5G in the building, and if you had a 5G device, you could watch the play from multiple different camera angles. We want to do more of that sort of thing.
And do you have visibility? I'm just going to ask my own question now, and then I'll jump back into this thread. People are peppering you, which is good. Are there enough 5G devices to make this worthwhile in 2021, or is it a longer term strategy than that? Like, how do you guys see the ROI on that?
We will certainly build products that work for people with 5G and without 5G. I mean, we are obviously owned by Verizon Wireless, so it's in our best interest to make it interesting to you to want to upgrade your phone.
Right. And in those situations where it's 5G, can people who have 4G use boosted 4G signals? Is that like a option in that environment? Or is it really you need a 5G enabled phone or service to do some of the activations that will be most interesting?
I am definitely not an engineer, so I will defer
I'm not
on the
either,
boost,
so I thought I'd ask you.
the boosted content. But we will build most of our products so that they could work on 4G or 5G, but the experience on a 5G device. I was sitting at the Super Bowl with a 4G device sitting next to my engineer who had a 5G device, and his experience with the multicam was much cooler than the things I could do.
Yeah.
I've been trying to convince Verizon to give me a 5G phone, so maybe this will help.
I know somebody who works there if you right? So fantasy gaming, super important to you guys in general. You were behind some of the MGM work that was done in the past year or two. How are you guys innovating in that area with your fantasy community? You have one of the largest fantasy sports communities on the internet. Certainly a core asset to you guys. What's next for that? Lots of moves for DraftKings, FanDuel, and others. DraftKings just went public.
Yep.
You guys, I mean, again, just historically have created an environment where it's free to play, lots of assets and content available to these folks. What are you doing next?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Megan, by the way.
Yeah, that was a softball. Good job, Megan.
Yeah, so we did one interesting thing last year. So as we have now completed 2 years where we have streamed live NFL games. So in our app, you can watch every national game and every local game, depending on where you're living in Yahoo Sports app. Last year, for the first time, we enabled you to also watch games in Yahoo Fantasy, which fantasy fans really loved. We want to be the home of, you can do everything you want to do in gaming, everything from free to play to fantasy to DFS to betting with our partner at MGM. We want to serve your gaming needs in any way that you want to.
Where will you make the most money? Will it be subscription-based services? Will it be transaction fees? What is the core philosophy behind that business?
Look, fantasy is largely a free-to-play game, and we have millions and millions of users every year. I think in the future, we do want to find ways to offer them services they want. If they don't want to gamble, absolutely, we would never push someone into something they didn't want to do. But
so it's primary advertising. The
business today is certainly primarily advertising driven. We do hope in the future to add more subscription business over time or transaction-based business.
So I think some of the folks on here were piqued by my question around the demographics and viewership numbers for women's sports. So there's another question in general, which is, what do you care about, right? You run this business with several other executives that constantly have to make decisions about what editorial stuff you do, what partnerships you sign. What demographics do you care about? What metrics do you pay attention to? Things like that.
Yeah, so Verizon Media pays attention to something called sort of reach or daily active users. Verizon Media reaches just under 900 million active users a year. Yahoo Sports is in around 60 or 70 million monthly active users. So our goal is to reach as many people as possible. We are a big megaphone. We want to reach as many people as possible. We care deeply about that. And then I think now that we're owned by Verizon, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can position ourselves as innovators. I think that's been the new layer that's been added on.
And you guys have obviously a mixed media format. You can reach folks through editorial, through video, through all kinds of different streaming services, things like that. How do you decide what your portfolio should look like? And David asks, where does podcast fit into your media and sports strategy?
Yeah, so we do have quite a few podcasts. A lot of our writers are doing podcasts along with them. Chris Haynes, who writes on the NBA for us, does really great podcasts. He gets some top NBA talent to break stories and do them with him. So we definitely offer podcasts as well.
And do you have a perspective on how important or strategic rugby is to Verizon?
Yeah, I would tell you, I went to my first rugby match a couple years ago. I was in Dublin. I watched the Ireland team play the Scotland team. It was really, really fun. I could tell you today it's not an area of focus for us, but that doesn't mean I'm not personally interested in watching.
You need to personally go to more games. And
it was fun though. It was really fun.
Okay, that's one answer for sure. With leagues and players turning to esports during the live sports pause, is there an area that Verizon and Yahoo feels will continue to grow in that partnership area? That's from Michelle.
Yeah, for sure. You've seen Verizon at a corporate level has gone ahead and sponsored some esports teams and has gotten more and more involved in that. I think that esports is an interesting use case as well for 5G, so that sparks a lot of interest. We haven't yet on Yahoo Sports done a ton of airing of esports yet. We have had fun doing things with players, watching them play a game like Madden or something like that.
And Marty asks, within your MLB partnership, has your team provided specific recommendations to help them create a younger audience or reach a broader audience than they currently have? Do your partners, I know you guys do data exchange, you guys have your first party data, the NFL and others do as well. You guys are constantly trying to, append that data, make sense of that data. Do they view you as a partner in some of these decisions, as Marty asks? Like, are you sought out as like thought leaders or innovators from that perspective?
Absolutely. We're talking to many of our league partners right now about what we can do to help generate interest for them in the upcoming season. And a lot of the things that we do, I think, attract a younger audience. You find a lot of younger people want to watch snackable content. We try to create content that people can watch, whether it's highlights or articles or things on social media, that if they want to watch the whole game, that's great. Or if they want to watch a 5-minute recap, or if they just want to see the highlights. We also create highlight reels just for your fantasy team. So that I think the biggest thing we've noticed among young people is they want to consume content when and where they want to. And we try to make that possible.
That's a perfect segue to Len's question about just your analytics on whether or not folks are watching stuff in home or out of home. I imagine your pattern of behavior has changed dramatically over the last few months, but traditionally, where does Yahoo, and Verizon skew on this thing? Are you guys usually on the go, or do you have any way to correlate it to their home address and whether or not they're in home just on a second screen or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen data. We do have data on whether they're on desktop or on their phone. We are not allowed to cast NFL games onto a big screen, but I can see data on whether they're on desktop or on their phone. One interesting thing we have seen is that there's a huge volume on Sundays, not just for watching football, but for us, fantasy is a big thing. We've noticed, for example, that a lot of people will do things on their phone, but when they really want to do drafting and big roster changes, they often will log into their desktop to do that, which probably implies that they're home. We see people doing all of the above. People watch with their kids at a soccer game, on the bus, at home. We honestly often do have a discussion about whether the phone is the primary screen or the secondary screen when we talk about things like overlay and statistics. It's something we think about a lot.
Well, let me push up against your engineering skills again, because you just said something that piqued my interest. How do you guys prevent your stuff from doing a Chromecast or some sort of thing onto a big screen? How would does the device not have blocked that, or I wouldn't even know how that would
Okay.
work.
It's a good question. I don't know
All
if
right,
I know the answer to that.
let's you and I follow up on that. I don't know how I mean, obviously, one of the devices needs to know that the other one shouldn't be allowed to do that from a rights perspective. It's got to be some digital rights management thing, right?
We have a lot of really good engineers. We're allowed to stream NFL games
Yes, you
on
do have a
tablets
lot
and
of
cell
engineers,
phones.
and you and I are not one of them.
I'm not one of them.
Yeah, okay. How are you when it comes to open innovation from small companies and individual developers? Do you use a lot of freelancers? Do you work with a lot of startups?
So Verizon has about 130,000 employees. Obviously, a lot of them do things other than what we're talking about. They work in retail stores and the like. We have a whole arm of Verizon called Verizon Ventures that actually invests in small companies. So we are always looking for innovative companies. We would usually like to partner and invest in a company that we would also want to do strategic business with. But there's a long list of companies we do look at. Some of them have become public over time.
And back to the metrics question, just bouncing around again, when you answered it originally, you focused pretty heavily on reach. You're on one of our leadership boards. We talk about the difference between reach and fan engagement, and the definition of fan engagement, to be honest, how it means everything. So it really is difficult to figure out what it truly means. What do you, when you think of fan engagement, whether it's the Verizon, answer or the Ishwara answer, when is a fan engaged? What are they doing that you can picture in your head and you're going, oh, we cracked through this like first layer, we've got them now, they're hooked, or they're really involved in what's happening?
Yeah, for us, there are a few different things beyond just reach. The next thing we look at is how long are they spending with us? I mean, one of the things that we found, for example, with the National Women's Soccer League, and we streamed CONCACAF last year, is that people came in and watched for a really long time. I think average, minutes watched was much higher than we honestly expected. The other thing we're trying to increasingly get to is logged in users. Logged in users enable us to serve them more. And as we get into the DFS and betting space, it's something that's required anyways. It enables us to really personalize their experience to a greater degree. If we know that you're a Boston Red Sox fan, we can serve you articles, content, potentially bets that might be more interesting to you than to me.
And with that definition of engagement, how do you measure the value of sponsorship? When you think about, these new sponsorship tools that are out there, whether it's GumGum, Hook It, Blinkfire, they all promise to measure, impressions. They can obviously retarget and do a bunch of things based on social data and appended data from Epsilon and Axiom and all those guys. Do you use those tools, or do you rely on in-house analysis of whether or not you're getting the ROI for sponsorship?
Yeah, I mean, most of the work we do is done in-house with public, the data tools that we provide for. I think Verizon is a difficult company to negotiate a deal with if you're the league, because we want a lot of different things. I mean, you'll see many of our deals have a lot of different components. They'll have a sponsorship component, but they'll also have a content component. They'll potentially have a 5G innovation component. And the goals of each of those different pieces, and potentially a FiOS component as well. We may be, having MLB TV or NBA League Pass available to cable subscribers. So all of those components of the deals have different metrics, but also overlap with one another.
And Lindsay asks, as data shows that more users are cutting the cord for traditional media bundles, do you see sports leagues awarding primary broadcast rights to OTT or digital streaming companies?
It's a really good question. You see it asked all the time. I mean, I think there are a few things to think about it. I mean, the leagues have to decide, what matters to them. Is it money? Is it reach? And I don't know that it's an either or. I mean, the smart leagues have managed to cut up their rights so that they're distributed in lots of different places. One of the things I would particularly like to see is the idea of a microtransaction. One of the things that we do, I think, is really cool is that you can just potentially buy one NBA game or 15 minutes of an NBA game. I think that will be a lot of the future of what sport fans really want.
And NBC has done this, integrated video commerce concept, right? Where you watch and you buy. Is that capability available on Verizon platforms anywhere? I mean, I have to imagine you have such integrated e-commerce functionality. The kind of watch to buy thing seems like a natural fit for what you guys do.
Yeah, we're looking at it a lot, for example, with the merchandise category, the ticketing category, or with the betting category as well. We're thinking a lot about that.
In each of those three categories, do you have official partners? Like, do you have a partnership with Fanatics? Do you have a partnership with Ticketmaster or StubHub or somebody like that?
Sure. Yahoo Sports today has a partnership with Fanatics, with SeatGeek, and with MGM.
Got it. So those would be your three sort of microtransaction opportunities or e-commerce opportunities if things were to evolve.
I think so. I think those are the three. And it's interesting if you think about it, because being owned by Verizon, we already have a lot of billing relationships with customers in two ways. One through Verizon Wireless, and also through our DFS business on the Yahoo Sports side.
Well, fortunately, some of the questions have slowed down, so I've been able to catch up a little bit. But I'm wondering right now, sort of what are you looking for when it comes to growing your team and the skills that you think the next generation of leaders are going to require? You're in a position to hire and build out a crack team that's looking at those three areas we just talked about. And to be honest, a lot of the research we've put out in front of you and the other leadership board members has been about this idea of a fluid fan studio, the idea that you have to have convergence across the digital and social stuff, which you do so well, the mobile and in-venue stuff, which you guys are obviously omnipresent with the 5G infrastructure, and then just literally traditional broadcasts. So how do you find these people? I mean, they're not coming out of your sports business management programs. Where are they coming from? Other industries, other forms of entertainment?
Yeah, I mean, I always say I look for three things when I hire. I look for someone who's really smart, who's hardworking, and someone who I like. I spend a lot of time with my colleagues. You know, we used to travel a lot and spend a lot of time together. I don't think there's necessarily one background that it has to be from. I worked in banking and consulting, so I tend to like people who have sort of traditional skill set. It's an interesting group in my group because we do all sorts of different things. We negotiate deals. We have to then financially model them and justify them to finance. Then we have to create presentations for senior management. So it's a wide variety of skills. And being at Verizon, it's an interesting mix of skills because you want to be nimble and innovative, but you also have to be polished and poised for a big company environment as well.
And when you look at the 40 under 40 class that you were part of, which peers do you admire the most and why?
Well, we never got to have our celebration or party, so we never all got to meet each other. Was that just flat out
canceled?
I've heard it's been postponed, and I had bought a dress, and I was very excited for this. I'm hoping that it will be postponed. But I would tell you that I've worked for many, I guess primarily men who won 40 under 40. So it was something I wanted for a very long time. And it seems like, I don't know, I mean, Jeff Reese, my current boss, David Apperton, who I used to work for, Lawton Logan, who I used to work for, they had all won, some of them multiple times. So it's very exciting. I was very proud.
Okay. And you haven't met your class. You haven't met the others.
I know some of them just through the business, but we haven't all been able to get together because it got announced sort of right before this all happened. But.
Okay. Well, this is also an Ask Me Anything that can get pretty personal. So somebody here wants to know, of all the different sports that you've been able to attend and of the different types of sports you like to watch, do you have a favorite?
Oh, I love to play and watch tennis. I've gone to Wimbledon, the French Open, the US Open, Miami, Indian Wells, both of the Canadian tournaments. I love to play and watch tennis. Wimbledon's probably the best event I've ever been to. It's just so uniquely British, and I was fortunate to have some friends in high places, so I got really great access. The other event that was really cool that I only went to once was the Kentucky Derby. It's a really amazing event to go to. Something different than, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to been to a lot of sporting events. The one I really wanted to go to that I still hope I can go to is the Tokyo Olympics. I've never been to an Olympics, and I'd love to do that.
Yeah, that is a moving target for sure. So we have another question. How do you approach the strategy about global and diverse content in the long term? We are in need now for new sports because we rely on Bundesliga and Korean baseball, et cetera. Do you see this as an opportunity to add this in the future, or are we just waiting for the NFL and NBA to come back? I think this question is largely about what most people are looking for, which is there's this crystal ball thing that we all want to have when it comes to, are we going to be relying on different regions to launch and come back online? Or do you feel like there's like this moment that everybody's kind of waiting for where they open the doors again and the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, all the Major League Soccer, it just all comes back? Right. What's the sentiment within Verizon? I mean, like, again, it can be a very personal answer, but like, what's the sentiment? Is there this big moment we're all waiting for, or do we feel like it's just going to keep trickling out?
I mean, we very much hope that all of our partners complete their season, play as many games as they can. I think, you know, our single greatest financial investment is the NFL. So we are very hopeful that the NFL, I think that will be a big marking point for the industry as a whole. that the NFL comes back on time or close to on time and has a great full season would be great for us. Fantasy football is a big piece of our business. We'd love to have some summer content if we could get baseball and hockey and basketball all playing. Absolutely agree. I mean, I love watching international sports too. I don't know that Taiwanese baseball is going to be the next big thing in the US, but I think that you have to think about it on an ROI basis too. We pay rights fees for these, and it's dependent on viewership too. We haven't seen that many of these international sports take off from a viewership perspective, even during a time when there's not a whole lot of competition.
We've talked a lot about your league partnerships. There's also a question here about your event partnerships. Do you guys own rights to marathons or other sort of single event types of content that may be produced?
Not on the Yahoo Sports side. We do not own events. The other parts of the business, like Engadget, do put on big financial conferences and the like, though.
And how are the leagues currently communicating with you about their return to play strategy? Are you involved in some of those meetings, or is there a schedule that you guys are joining, every Monday or something like that?
Yeah, we talk to our league partners multiple times a week, all the time, about all sorts of different things. And we do hear and ask when the leagues and the sports are going to come back. Honestly, you hear from them a lot of the same things you hear in the Sports Business Journal or in the press. I think everybody wants to play, everybody wants to do it safely, but I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen. I think the commissioners are doing their very best. But there's nobody here that knows exactly what's going to happen.
No, it's been shocking. I mean, every time I speak with the league officials, I expect to hear something I'm not hearing from anybody else, but it seems to be that we're all saying the same things to each other and hoping that some of it sounds reasonable. But certainly what is definitely true is that there's a very clear hyper focus on which regions and what states are going to be open for business. I think everybody is looking at if there's a crystal ball game everybody's playing, it's trying to predict which governments or which local municipalities have the willingness to lean forward, because those are the stadiums that are going to get instrumented and those are the investments people are going to make.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective as a sports fan and as someone who's worked in the sports business, I certainly want fans in stadiums. It's important for the financial health of the entire industry. As a sports media brand, to me personally, it doesn't matter that much where the games take place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it does matter enormously to the leagues
sure.
Because that's where they have to have the athletes. That's where they need to quarantine people. That's where they need to set up relationships with medical staff and things of that nature. So I think that's the game they're playing. All right. So Ishwara, we're getting close to the bottom of the hour, and I wanted to just give you an opportunity to wrap up, drop the mic, do whatever it is that you feel is necessary. This has been great. I'm sure everybody's really appreciated your insights, and it's one of the harder AMAs I've had to do. There's been a ton of questions. One last one. How important are fans to TV viewership? How important are fans to TV viewership? So I guess it's like, how important are having fans in the venue to TV viewership?
Yeah, no, it was interesting. This weekend I watched some of the Bundesliga, and it's very eerie. It's a strange phenomenon. I mean, it's interesting in some ways because you can hear what the players are saying. So I think it creates new opportunities to create different types of experiences. It's going to take some getting used to. I tend to think ratings are going to be huge when sports comes back because people are going to have missed it so much. What will be interesting, however, to see is how much the schedules change and how much competition there are. If you see sports overlapping that didn't before, it'll be really interesting to see how the networks deal with that, how fans deal with it.
Yeah, and I think, again, what I've read and what we discussed with the Bundesliga is how do they maintain the momentum? Because I think that there's a novelty that wears off and there's an excitement that needs to be built, which is, again, I mean, just a little bit of a plug. That's what the whole hackathon's about. So I would love for your team to participate. So tell them to get on it.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up here? And I'll get
I mean, just a note of positivity that, I mean, this is temporary. I think we all believe and hope that things will come back to something new, maybe better, maybe different. I know that for many of you who are unemployed or have recently graduated, it's a difficult time, but I think that this too shall pass, and those of us who are in this industry are here to try to help people.
Well, I know from working with you that you're a phenomenal human. So people on this call that are looking for advice, mentorship, or just somebody to bounce ideas off, Ishwara is one of those rare folks in the industry that is open to that, and we're grateful you spent time with us today. And thank you guys all for firing off so many questions. I hope I asked everybody's, and if you didn't get to ask your question, Gina's going to tell you how to continue the conversation with Ishwara, her team, and others. But thank you guys for joining today. Gina?
Yes, so we put in the chat window is a link to our Slack community, bit.ly/SIL Slack. Come join. Lots of members of Ishwara's team are on there as well. Don't forget, next week on Tuesday, if you've been curious about esports, how they're planning their season, how traditional sports leagues can look to esports for inspiration and advice, please join us with the Global Chief of Strategy for the ESL, Craig Levine, and we have our in-house gaming expert, Abe Stein, who's going to help moderate that conversation. And as always, join the hackathon, as Josh said, links for that in the chat as well. So, and if you don't want to join the hackathon, but you're curious, you kind of just want to be a voyeur, make sure you're following us on Facebook, because we're going to be streaming a lot of our check-ins, our keynotes, our roundtables that are going to be going on during the 48 hours of the hackathon this Thursday and Friday live on Facebook. So if you're more curious and want to watch, you can do that. If you're ready to get your hands dirty and join, you can do that as well. The link is in the chat. So thanks, guys, for joining us, and everyone, please stay safe.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ishwara.
Thanks.